Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're watching a bona fide classic.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say. Even though one of us doesn't necessarily agree that it should be.
Yes.
The Palm Beach Story.
Criterion had a sale the other day, and I bought a whole bunch of classics that I wanted to re-see. So I saw Holiday last night, and then I thought it would be good to see The Palm Beach Story with Mike. Little did I know.
That I have seen it before. And I really properly hate this film.
Why?
I think it's
How can anyone
boring,
hate this film?
noisy, monotone, unmodulated. I hate every performance.
Oh,
I hate every line
you
of
hate
dialogue.
Mary Astor in this?
Because I think it's the thing of like once one bit of it starts turning you off, every part of it just starts turning me off. I can see that like certain lines are funny.
Yes.
Like on paper.
Hilarious. Not just on paper.
I feel absolutely none of it, and I just don't get why people like. So the thing is, I watched this 3 years ago, I think, because I had seen Unfaithfully Yours, because I saw an interview with Quentin Tarantino, which was from maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where he talked about like his top 10 films, and that was one of them. He talked about why he liked it, and I don't really remember what he said about why he liked it, but I watched it and I really liked it, and I think one of the main reasons I liked it was the structure, the thing about fantasizing about killing his wife and going back, because actually a lot of the dialogue in that wasn't the kind of sparkling, witty stuff that Sturges is really associated with.
That we have in the Palm Beach Story.
That is supposedly. But, I mentioned this to Celia, who I've mentioned many times and has been on the podcast before, and she loves films of this era, and she loves screwballs and things. And so she's like, you've got to see the Palm Beach Story, fabulous. And I watched it and I just hated every minute.
You didn't hate this or that, you hated every minute. It was painful.
Yeah, genuinely. And then she went into a whole thing about how English people don't like Preston Sturges and she doesn't know why.
I agree.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I have a theory as to why.
Okay.
My theory is that you all pride yourself on being so clever with wordplay. I mean, there's no other culture, English-speaking culture that I know of, that takes so much pride in word games and wordplay and, kind of making all kinds of connotative things with language. And you can't deal with English being spoken in another way. And the thing about Preston Sturges is that his films are all full of wordplay and language games and so on. And they're just not, they're American, kind of.
I can see that.
And you just don't get it, and you get resentful.
I can see that as a theory. No, I can. And I wouldn't necessarily discount it. Although I also wouldn't say that, like when I'm kind of thinking through, trying to reason out my response to the film, it's not something that comes to mind. When I'm trying to be as honest as I can about what turns me off, I don't think that's it, because I like really well written, witty stuff, and some of it is American, and I like clever wordplay and stuff. As I said, but I don't think I object to when it's American.
Well, I mean, let's look at this, right? Because it has one of the most brilliant beginnings of all time, right? It's like a wedding. That doesn't initially make sense, because some are rushing to get married, and it's kind of, one is stuck inside a cupboard, tied up, you don't know why, right? And so on. And, then you move on to this couple, and, this thing, they lived happily ever after, did they? That's very clever, and particularly at this time when there are expectations of a romantic comedy. And then kind of you go, and the whole thing is like about a divorce. A couple that can't pay their rent, that love each other, but I mean, the first 5 minutes or so, just Joel McRae's pratfalls and his running after her, and I mean, all that stuff I find very funny and very well done. I mean, just like very well done kind of pratfall comedy, really.
Yeah, well, that's not witty. That's not.
Okay.
I mean, actually, the pratfall that I like,
Listen.
I really like the bit where the guy falls out the car towards the end. I think that's a really well done prank stunt. Yeah.
Well, him falling while he's chasing her in their house as she's leaving to take a taxi, all those pratfalls are really well done. But that's not even the half of it. The dialogue is brilliantly witty. you know.
No, sure.
So
Yeah, I don't know.
there's a formal wit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ending and the beginning, the happy ending not being a happy ending. You know, there's the physical comedy of, you know, all the pratfalls, right? And they all land, right? And then there are all the jokes, right? You know,
Yeah, I don't know. No, it does.
sex and sin.
It doesn't work for me. I find John McCrea deeply talentless.
Oh, I love him.
Really deeply talentless. And actually, that's something because I was just talking to Celia, asking her for her thoughts, because this has come up before, and you know, she repeated everything she says every time we talk about this film. But she also expanded on a couple of things, and one of the things was John McCrea, the husband. Well, actually, this is kind of a little more widely about why she likes Sturges, which I think is interesting, right? And I told her that I was going to read all of this out. So she said, the great thing about Preston Sturges is that he's the great poet of American male inarticulacy. And when his character is Rex Harrison, as in Unfaithfully Yours, who's supposed to be a blisteringly intelligent and verbose polymath, that's not funny. But when Texas Ranger Joel McCrea launches into a big speech about love that's ridiculous and funny and sweet and quite true, that is funny, because he's a definite yep and nope kind of guy, like a John Wayne or something like that, except John Wayne would never do one of these films. Like the strong, silent cowboy American archetype. So there's unexpected depths and also verbal articulacy. Sturges is like, what if American men could say feelings in words? And that's really quite modern in terms of how it approaches masculinity and deconstructing it. She says, the strong, silent type, what if he wasn't? What if he was ridiculous and in love and said so? I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Well, it is, and I would mostly agree with it. Yeah, because he is very articulate, and he is the one who's constantly spilling out his feelings for her. And he is kind of being articulate about it, actually. So all of that is fine. What I like about him is that he speaks with a kind of earnest fervor. He's the straight man, right? Kind of, he's not being ironic or, like he's playing on a different key than, say, Mary Astor, who is like, you know, completely stylized and way up there, right?
Yeah.
And actually this kind of play against both Mary Astor on the one level and then against Claudette Colbert on another, I think is both moving and funny.
Do you think there's a comparison between McCrea's performance and the performance of someone like Leslie Nielsen in Airplane, as in playing it that straight?
No, because one is playing it straight but without feeling. Yeah, and the thing is that Joel McCrea, like the whole performance, is a vehicle for feeling. His earnestness actually comes from the heart. He feels that, and he's trying to communicate that with her. Yeah, it's not a blank kind of, you know, the way that Leslie Nielsen is. They're not comparable to me at all.
No, it's fine. The thing is, I actually find I find him so blank, but I agree his role is at least looking for emotional kind of openness. But I find the performance so blank, which is why I think I find him talentless, as opposed to it being like a deliberate choice. That actually, that I was thinking about Leslie Nielsen because I was thinking, that level of playing it straightness that Nielsen brought to Airplane and Police Squad and so on is something that I would actually really welcome in this. But like it feels like he doesn't get there, but actually maybe what he's not getting at is the emotional transparency.
Well, see, I mean, to me, I think this is like so far superior to somebody like Leslie Nielsen that, you know, they're not even on the same planet. I mean, that scene running out of bed, chasing after her, is really, really broad, I mean, he loses his pants, kind of the woman behind him sees his ass, then the elevator sees his ass. I mean, those are all laughs, you know, and with most people, they would land, except with you, right? I mean, that's very broad playing, and it's all really being done through kind of his trying to chase after her because he loves her, right? So, and the feeling is real, and the situation is broad, and, you know, and he is very convincing, kind of doing all of that. You have to be, right? So I think he's wonderful, really.
Fair enough. You know that when I make comparisons between actors or films, they're not always necessarily value judgments. Just saying.
Well,
you know, like I mean, it's true that I don't like John McCrea in this.
Have you seen Sullivan's Travels?
No, and I refuse to.
Well, you really must. He's so wonderful in it, you know, and so skilled. You know, I want to make a film about suffering and people's and you know, he's got a cold, and then he gets, it's almost like, you know, a religious feeling that overtakes him. You know, he's wonderful. Right.
What about the supporting cast? This is something that Celia brought up. Celia was saying she loves character actors. She says they're her whole reason for liking classic Hollywood films, although, in brackets, although they're not actually banned by national cinema, because you get the same thing in French cinema and in Bollywood. We've seen a number of films of this era where you're like, oh, and this person, you know them all. Yes. And is that like half the reason for, you know, loving these?
Well, partly, but also Preston Sturges has his own kind of company, so to speak, right? So, you know, somebody like William Demarest, he appears kind of in all of them, really, and he's brilliant, right? He's the ordinary guy who shoots the window. And Franklin Pangborn always appears as the sissy. I mean, in this case, he's showing the apartments, right? And the wife of the deaf guy, you know, appears in Sullivan's Travels, and she plays very broadly and fluttery and so on. So, I mean, you feel you're entering a world. Preston Sturges is his own world, and part of the reason why it's his own world is because it's people by these particular people, right? Who are kind of types, you know, but they're witty and they're inclusive or harsh or, I love them, really. And I also love how you know, the more you delve into these things, the more you make associations, right? So, for example, you know, the Rudy Valley character, the millionaire, you can see how Some Like It Hot takes off from this. How this has been an influence on Some Like It Hot, right? The millionaire that Jack Lemmon ends up with, you know, facially, verbally, like in terms of bits of dialogue, you can see kind of cross-references like that. But I also just think it's genuinely funny in a way that one doesn't associate with American comedy, in the sense that it's also incredibly absurdist. I mean, that's not true. I should take that back. There's a lot of absurdism in American comedy. But in this, you know, elegant, you know, drawing room, millionaire, verbal wit comedy, I suppose, you know, Screwball is that.
Well, I mean, this is Screwball.
And this is Screwball. You know, but the thing about the Hare and Hounds or whatever, kind of, you know, the whole train station scene and going in the train, you know, I suppose you could find it tiresome, or you could go into the spirit of the whole thing. And if you go into the spirit of the chaos and the absurdism and, you know, I mean, I like it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't blame you for liking it, and I don't blame Celia for liking it. And like I say, I think there is some X factor that I just miss with this film.
Yes.
I just miss it. Like, I remember when Alfa Romeo came out with this car called the 8C Competizione, which is just some sports car, but people were falling over themselves to talk about how beautiful this thing was, and I just did not see it. And it wasn't the same as like, oh, I get why you like this, and I just don't like it. I was baffled as to why it was even beautiful.
Yes.
And I kind of feel like that with this. Like, I just do not connect at all. And I can't properly explain it, but once it gets into it, I'm just thinking this is just noisy and loud and talking, and I'm just not feeling any of it. Oh yeah, that was a funny line, I could see that. You know, the old guy, you have to shout, and he can't hear anything, and then he misunderstands, and he says, oh yes, it's Thursday, whatever. You're like, oh god, this is supposed to be the cleverest thing ever.
I love all those gags, I must say.
Yeah.
You know, and then what he says is also genuinely witty, like, you know, about and daring for its time. Yeah. Life is, you know, what is it? Sex and sin.
and honestly, I think every
sex and sin are always with us.
And honestly, I really think every joke in here I have laughed at somewhere else. And
maybe it comes from here.
No, but the point of that is not to say this is unoriginal or whatever. That's not the point. It's just to say that actually I should like this. I should like what's going on here. And somewhere else I've laughed at the same sorts of things, and it's just not clicking here, and I cannot tell you why.
Well, don't take this the wrong way. But, I think you're too conventional about things to do with marriage and so on. And the thing about this movie, the thing that makes it so daring and so on, is that actually it's two people who really love each other, who are very bad for each other, right? And she can get by, just on her sex appeal, and she's happy to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that alone, is kind of really daring and unconventional, right? Because really, he's the sweet damsel in distress, right?
Yeah.
She's the able one who can kind of, get what she wants, really, almost without trying, right? She's pretty, and she knows how to use it, really. And that's the premise of the film. And I could be putting words in your mouth, or whatever, but I think that's a premise you inherently dislike.
I honestly don't even think I get as far as that premise before I start hating it.
Okay.
I just think it turns me off from the start. I think its energy and the whole opening. I think sometimes people can be very demanding about comedy, and I don't necessarily say this about myself, particularly, or British people. I think just generally people can be like when a sitcom starts on TV, it generally gets a harsher reception than a drama does. And I think the reason is that people are like, make me laugh, or it didn't make me laugh. Whereas people will give drama time to develop.
Sure.
Yeah, it shouldn't make me cry immediately. But people are like, if it's not funny straight away, it's just not funny. And I think maybe I've never got past that with this. But I mean, I've given it 2 chances now. Over 3 years.
And maybe, one puts too much pressure on it by saying, oh, it's this classic.
Yeah.
Maybe one shouldn't say that. Maybe one should just say, I really like this film, watch it with me. Because, there's a lot to like. Joel McHale and Claudette Colbert are immensely attractive, right, and immensely skilled. The clothes are fantastic. The jewels are fantastic. The settings are fantastic, right? It's got yachts and palaces and trains, right? Yeah. So, there's already like a lot to like, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't put this burden on it, it's a masterpiece.
Well,
right?
I definitely don't put it on it anymore because I've decided that it's rubbish.
Right. Well.
So I'm not expecting it to be the greatest thing ever anymore. But like I say, it's now that thing of. But people seem to think it is, and I'm just baffled at the state of the world.
Well, I tell you, I would watch this film again just for the Mary Astor character. She makes me laugh, like, from the beginning. And also because she's so matter of fact, right? Like 5 husbands, oh yes, this one, or whatever. Oh, people generally like me for my money, blah, blah, blah. It's a fantastic character. And it's a fantastic way of playing. Yeah, she throws all the lines away, she moves through it like anything, with elegance and wit. And she's not afraid to be harsh, right? Like the whole character of Toto, whatever, there's a meanness there, right? And I'm not saying that the film is perfect. Some of the racial stereotyping is like, it's of its time, but it's very unpleasant, But, there's a kind of... I think these films, to me, express America at its best, right? They're about very rich people, but they're very democratic, right? And, people talk to each other, and they're very accessible. There's a real kind of feeling of equality about the whole thing. She might be a billionaire who's been married 5 times and, who can kind of do all of these things, but she inherently feels an affinity with this woman who's about to divorce her husband. And, who's just had everything bought for her. And she admires the fact that, the woman is so smart and, that she can get someone to buy her all the stuff she needs, right?
Yeah.
There's not a judgment on it.
Do you not feel a sense...
Breezy, the film.
Yeah, that's true. Do you not feel a sense of... is the film trying to puncture the upper classes or the rich?
Well, it's certainly kind of laughing at them, but it's also making them endearing and adorable. The wonderful thing about Sturges, I think, is the only people who are at the butt of his jokes are the pompous and the stuffy ones. So the Rudy Valley character in this one, but there's also an affection. Yeah, there's also an affection towards him. You're not meant to hate him, right? So I think the films show the ridiculousness of life, but with a great deal of affection for human, foibles. And also, Sturges is one of the few American directors who unabashedly loves intelligence.
And
know,
values it.
Yeah, and values it. And kind of doesn't speak down to the audience, kind of brings the audience up with him, right? Kind of, all those jokes, the wordplay, it requires, it assumes a smart audience, an audience who's smart and quick.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you think that's more generally true of Screwball, no matter who's doing it?
Well, it depends, because, a lot of screwballs are... screwballs are quite a loose definition in a way, right? I was watching Holiday yesterday, and it's a play with 3 acts, lots of 3-dimensional characterization. It also has a particular attitude to rich people and money and so on. And there's also, but it's very serious in ways, and everything is slightly, there's nothing breezy about it, let's put it this way, right? Like, it's very serious in many ways. And a lot of, those comedies of remarriage have a deeper emotional resonance than this film does, right? I don't know. I like the smarts and the breeziness and the elegance. That it's very American. Very American of that time. So, what else does Celia say?
I think I've mostly covered it, but she quoted a few lines because that's what she does. She says, basically, if I mention this film, she goes, "Oh, it's so quotable."
Some people know it by heart.
Yeah, and then she knows. She goes through
my memory
5 or
shit.
6
Otherwise,
lines.
I would quote you some as well.
Men don't get smarter as they age; they just lose their hair. If there's one line she'll quote, that'll be it.
It's a brilliant line.
Then she said, "English people don't like Preston Sturges properly. You don't get him at all." Stuff about the Weenie King.
Yes, those are all like hilarious. The Weenie King.
Lay off them, you'll live longer. That's one I do like. But like I say, like the reason I don't laugh at that line is because somehow the packaging of just everything is just not grabbing me. It's funny. I really am trying to be honest about because I think
I appreciate it.
I'm trying to be honest about sort of if there is some kind of deep-seated thing that I don't want to admit. that I don't maybe it is true that I just don't like when Americans are funnier than I am. But honestly, I really don't think it's got anything to do with that because I really admire so much American comedy and love it.
Well, I used to teach the Lady Eve, which I think is one of the great screwballs of all time, with Henry Fonda and Barbara Stanwyck, and, they're divine, and they're divine looking. And again, she's so smart. She's like a gambler, smart cookie, and, she gets him. And anyway, it's just like, I think one of the great comedies of all time. I taught it for several years. It just did not go.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's my fault. I didn't, I couldn't communicate it to students properly. Right. But I also think that, a few times when I've screened it in Canada, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to convince students of why it's great. They get it. Whereas here, they didn't get it, and then I suppose I couldn't communicate it. So I think there is something cultural about Sturges. On the other hand, I went to a conference in last year, which had a fantastic paper by Doug Pye on The Miracle of Morgan's Creek. So, there's no question that Sturges has a whole bunch of fans in Britain. Yeah, so there's also a difference, I suppose, between like general accessibility and particular appreciation. But I think, I agree with Celia on the basis of my experience. Yeah. There's something that, about Sturges that British people don't naturally get anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Like the films don't play as well. Or in my experience, they haven't here. And I think The Lady Eve is like a masterpiece, really, which I would not say about this. Yeah, I do also think that it has I think the ending is almost too easy.
Yeah, I really hated the ending.
I love the twins thing because actually it explains the beginning. It makes sense of the beginning. Yeah, and the ending replies to the beginning and makes sense of both. So I like that. But it's like the moment that leads up to it It's just I felt I needed a little bit more. Right? Like, I still think it's a very great film, though. And like all great comedy directors, even someone as verbally articulate as Sturges is, he knows how to do comedy cinematically. Both formally, generically, visually. It's full of jokes.
Yeah. Maybe you have to be there.
Yeah.
Celia also says, well, she agrees with me that John McCrea isn't a good actor. She says, I don't think he's a good actor.
I think he is.
She says, I think the genius of the Sturges movies is in the casting. Like, does Rudy Vallee know this is funny? I don't think he does.
I don't think he does either.
That's kind of interesting.
There's actually a fantastic...
He's just playing himself, she says.
There's a fantastic essay by Gore Vidal where he recounts this interview with Orson Welles, who was like adorable and bitchy, you know, and so smart as well, making fun of Rudy Vallee, because Rudy Vallee took himself so seriously that he didn't get the joke. He didn't get the joke about anything. So
there you go. That's the end of my conversation with Celia about it, and mostly that's kind of the end of my limited thoughts on it because, it's not a film that I've been tempted to dig. I'd say it's not a film I've been tempted to dig into a second time. When you said you were going to put it on, I nearly threatened a fatwa against you.
Well, I'm glad you saw it through.
Yeah.
It's always kind of good to get, someone else's point of view.
I mean, the first time I watched Spaced, which was this British sitcom by the Shaun of the Dead guys, before Shaun of the Dead in 99, 2000, I'd heard this thing was hugely recommended and everything, and I bought the double series set, and I put the first episode on, and I thought, this is tedious, and so I didn't watch it, the rest of it. And then 3 years later, maybe, I saw it on my shelf and I thought I'd give that another go. And again, I didn't think much of the first episode, but when I got through it, the whole thing came alive. And now it's one of my favourite shows. And this can happen. Sometimes you need that time, but this hasn't worked for me on this.
Sometimes you're not in the mood for things, and actually sometimes you just don't get it. I mean, I have lived in enough different places to know that sometimes you've got to acquire structures of feeling. Like, not everything, it's not necessarily your fault that you don't get something. Sometimes there's reasons why you don't get something. Or sometimes it's a question of taste or affinity or mood. I think that's particularly true of comedy. So, I don't hold it against you. I'm not judging you because, you can't appreciate this great masterpiece of a cinema.
You just said it wasn't. I'm also trying to think about what you said about my attitude to marriage, and if that's true, and if there are things, because I think Screwball generally is a genre that tries to undercut those kind of relationships.
Yes.
And I like a lot of Screwball, so I'm not necessarily sure that it's true. Maybe it would have been once upon a time, and my attitude has changed. I mean, I can see where you're coming from.
Yes. Well, I'm not saying it's right, but that was,
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm happy to never watch this again now.
Right.
Give it a chance. Also, are they called Tom and Jerry because of the cartoon?
Who?
Tom and Jerry, the main two. The married couple, they're called Tom and Jerry, aren't they?
Ah, right. Well, it could very well be. Yes, the cartoon would have been...
I think it came out a couple of years earlier, the first Tom and Jerry cartoon.
Yes. Yes.
Bit of a coincidence, if not.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I mean, I've never even noticed that, actually.
So I've taught you something.
You have? Yes, I have much to learn.
All right, great.
Anyway, don't be discouraged by Mike's views. Give it a go yourself.
Yeah.
It is kind of, one of the highlights of American comedy of the 1940s. Thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. And the website with every podcast on is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.